In this episode of Simpa Says, Andrew Nathan discusses his journey from basketball aspirations
Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I told them playing basketball in the NBA.
to a successful career in IT and security, including military and Microsoft experiences.
I remember turning to my wife and telling her I'd made a massive mistake.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't do it. I didn't know what to do.
He highlights skills gained, the importance of teamwork, networking, and his mentorship-focused leadership philosophy.
So what can you achieve as a people manager that you can't achieve as a mentor? Anything I say as a mentor is a suggestion to that person. But if I become a people manager, I'm accountable for their success.
Andrew also addresses career challenges like cultural adaptation and workplace dynamics, offering valuable advice for aspiring professionals. Become part of our community by watching or listening and subscribing or following Simpa Says.
Cool. All right, well, welcome to the show, Andrew. Thank you very much for agreeing to talk with us today on Simpa Says.
Simpa Says.
Simpa Says. Sorry?
It's lovely to be here.
Lovely to have you, mate. All the way from Orlando, United States of America.
Stunning.
Okay, so let's get into it, mate. I'm going to take you back. I'm going to take you back to when you're a teenager, when you're in school. What did you want to do? What was the first thing in your mind you wanted to actually do, or you thought you might want to do? Because the thing is, most of us would know. None of us have that much of an idea when we're teenagers.
This is funny. I've actually had this conversation with my kids lately. Actually, interviewed for a job at Coles and didn't get it. Because when they asked me the question of where do you see yourself in 5 years, I told them playing basketball in the NBA. That was it, man. Legitimately, I thought I was going to be a professional basketball player. That was it. Like, I had no other plan, no other desire to do anything. So I had done up until about the 10th grade, I'd actually done pretty well at school. I had really good grades and all that kind of stuff. And then life happened sort of thing and moved from living with one parent to another parent. I was just like, I was all in on basketball. That's all I wanted to do.
Okay. Which I think a lot of people would. There'd be a lot of people out there who are sports nuts. I think I wanted to do sport. My dad was very, no, George, you have to go to school. For those who didn't get that, my dad was Greek and who could barely speak English, but had a very thick accent. Oh, that's interesting. And Coles, of course, for those watching who are not from Australia, is a supermarket here or a grocery store.
Yep.
On how you call it. Oh, that's interesting. So looking at your profile, your first role or your first, I guess I will say big, proper job, I guess, would have been for Centrelink. Yeah. And again, for those who don't know what Centrelink is a government agency that helps with, I guess, the best way to put it would be social payments and other
it's like
areas.
The Australian version of Social Security for American people and the dole for them in the UK.
Yeah. So how did that come about?
That was an interesting one because I don't have it on my LinkedIn, but prior to that, I was actually a debt collector. So my first actual proper job that I remember sort of, wearing a nice button-up shirt and showing up for every day was as a debt collector. And that was basically call center operations, right? Like we just sat there and they bumped up a whole heap of, like, every time you hung up the phone, the next case would jump up and you just start talking to people about you owe us money, pay us back. And then Centrelink happened to be hiring pretty heavily for the Newcastle call center. About 12 months later, and a bunch of the people I knew through being a debt collector were applying for the role at Centrelink. So went and applied, did all the interviews, and somehow managed to jag that job. And so I started, like, I think my LinkedIn says I was an electronic document author. I didn't know which way to actually phrase what I did. I'll give you a quick synopsis of what I did. I started in the call center. I was in the New Start, which was the adult unemployment benefit call center part. I did a bunch of stuff in there, became kind of one of the trainers, became one of the quality people. So I checked other people's work around the country to make sure they were doing the right thing, granting payments, and all the right stuff. I did some sort of weird internal course there, became one of like 5 people in Australia that could do this particular thing. Then I went and got a different job in Centrelink and went and actually worked in their debt collection part because I had that experience. Centrelink does a lot of debt matching with the ATO, so we were just going through Centrelink records and matching people that actually declared income versus people that were getting maximum social security benefits and that kind of stuff, and fixed that up. Then I actually got a call to go back to the call center to become a trainer, again with a view to making me a people manager, a team leader. So I went back there and things happened and life got in the way, and I ended up leaving there again after being a trainer for about a year and doing all that kind of stuff. I then left there, went to this different team, and then the lady who was running that team, her husband ran this thing that Centrelink had at the time. It was called e-reference. E-reference was the way we would take all of the client departments, Department of Finance, tax, and all that kind of stuff, take their legislation and then turn it into Centrelink legislation. And that was the Bible for everybody that worked at Centrelink at the time. So if you wanted to look something up, how do I make this decision? What do I have to do? It was all in e-reference. Ended up, my last job that I had was in that team, writing all of the policy and stuff internally for Centrelink.
Okay. So what are the types of skills you think, if you think back to, all right, so you played basketball, you then got a role as a debt collector, and then you've gotten this role where it sounds like you had various different types of roles at Centrelink and different skills, especially when you start looking at training, for example, and some of the team lead types of roles. What are the skills you think that you gained in some of those roles that then helped you and then moving forward even into today?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the one thing that sort of stuck with me forever is teamwork. And it's funny. I tell all my kids. I've got 4 kids. I tell them all the time. The best, there's 2 really good things about playing sport. One's competing with people, because I love to compete. And the other part is learning how to work with people, because you don't all see the world the same way. You haven't all gone through exactly the same thing to be where you are on that court, right? And it's the same in the workplace. You haven't all gone to the exact same school. You haven't learnt the exact same thing. But somehow, miraculously, you all happen to be on a team at the same time. And so that's the one thing I've been able to sort of bring with me through all of those roles, is the ability to go, okay, cool, like what makes that person tick? Because when I grew up playing basketball, I started as a point guard. So my job was to facilitate and make sure other people got the ball and all that kind of stuff. And so it was, for me, I looked at being a point guard, like, how does he like to get the ball? Like, does he want to score inside? Does he want to shoot from outside and that kind of stuff? And so I don't know whether it's trained my brain or whether I'm just wired that way, but that's how I like to look at interactions with people now, is like I get to know them and go, okay, cool, that person likes to work this way. So that way I know when I have to work with them again, I can frame it that way when I go back to them to ask them for help or whatever. I'm like, cool, I've done this bit for it. Can you help me with this bit? And that sort of helped me with all of those roles. And then the amount of teams I've been on over my life, like as a kid growing up, it's also helped me to, that whole, storm and norm and all that kind of stuff. I can, in my brain, get through that much quicker than, I feel like, in humble brag, much quicker than the average person. You rock up to a basketball camp, you've got about 3 hours to figure out how to play with somebody, and then you've got games for the rest of the weekend. So, just got to figure it out quick. And so I've been able to, I think, touch wood, I don't know if other people say that about me, but I've been able to use that skill in pretty much all of those roles. So number one, teamwork. And then this is going to be a weird one to say, but being a debt collector teaches you to take the ego and everything out of what you do.
Okay.
You
In what
call
way?
people and they just feed it to you. Absolutely. Like, I've never been abused more in my life than being a debt collector. Because you ring someone and, I was doing debt collection for, this will be date us a little bit, George, but for like Franklin Mint, right? Remember on the back of magazine?
Oh, yeah.
Like all of the plates with eagles on them and all that kind of stuff. Like, I was debt collection for Franklin Mint. So I had to ring these people and go, remember that plate you bought with the eagle on it? $6. And these people would just feed it to me, like call me out every name under the sun and all that kind of stuff. And the first few times you do it, it's like, you hang up the phone and you're shaking. You're like, oh my God, these people. And then you end up just taking, this isn't about me. This isn't about you. This is just a transaction. So being able to then apply that as well, like, and just go, cool, like, we're here to do a job at the end of the day. Like, not everybody's going to like it. Not everybody's going to want to see the world the way you want to do it. But, let's just get the job done and move on. So I think, that's also helped in various parts of my career, just being able to go, okay, step back. This isn't about me. This is just about the thing we're doing. Let's go and just grin and bear it. Or as I used to say when I was in the army, embrace the suck.
Yeah. Well, actually, it does make sense. It certainly does. In my limited time in customer service, I think I was a waiter for 5 weeks for a good reason. I was very bad at it.
Yeah.
I forgot to put someone's pizza order in through to the kitchen, and that was the end of my tenure as a waiter. Certainly wasn't a career for me. But yeah, I get the people screaming at you and getting annoyed at you thing. It's a bit weird at first, but it's certainly good. But not to that extent there, the debt collection. That sounds pretty intense when people go at you.
Yeah. But at the same time, like oddly, it's the most job satisfaction I've ever had. Ever.
So in what way?
Because it's like the thrill of the hunt, mate. Because the psychologically, and you get all this training as a debt collector, right? Like the average person lives within 5 kilometers of the first address they ever use.
Okay. Oh,
So
okay.
then,
It's interesting.
There's the 2 parts to debt collection. There's the one where it's just the automated, just running through the calls and just like they call the last number that you had on your file or whatever. And then there's what they call skip tracing. So the people that have abandoned that address, abandoned that phone number, and gone somewhere else and trying to find them. And that the whole finding people. Like I've found dudes. You mentioned I think before we started recording, you mentioned it, Netherlands. I found a dude in Amsterdam.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so that kind of stuff, man, I'll just go, yeah, I've got it. It's pretty cool.
That is funny. And again, for anyone listening or watching to this, the Netherlands is pretty far from Australia. Yeah, that's a fair effort. All right, so that probably brings me to the next question. So the Defence Force. You obviously joined the Army and then joined the Defence Force after you were in Centrelink. How did that come about? And then think about some of the traits we just talked about. What had you done in your life at that point that actually helped you prepare? Or even, was there a selection process to be able to get into the Defence Force?
Yeah, so back to your original question, what did you want to be when you grew up? When I was working at Centrelink, I realised I wanted to do IT. I loved playing with computers and mucking around with them, and I was at a point where I was in my mid to late 20s. I think I was like 27, 28. And for anybody that's gone to uni versus being employed for a while, you realise that you enjoy money. And so I didn't want to give up working to go to uni for 4 years to get a degree. So I went and sort of researched careers, and the military had always been something I'd sort of played with joining. Like I originally tried to enlist when I was like 19 as a radar operator, and then somebody told me that they're the first people that get bombed by the enemy, so probably wasn't a great idea. And so I, in all honesty, chickened out and didn't show up to my enlistment date. And then so it sort of stuck in the back of my head. And then I went and had a look, and they had this role called an information systems technician, and went down to, oddly enough, where I was working at Centrelink was about a block away from Defence Force recruiting. And so I went down one day and had a chat to them, and they said, yeah, you'll see this in memes and read about it on Reddit and all that kind of stuff. Defence Force recruiters, they lie to you. I'm telling you. They told me I'd be running all of the IT on the base, and you'd never deploy, you don't have to go out field and all that kind of stuff. You sit there and run the IT on the base. I was like, this is a pretty cool gig. They train you, and you get to live in Melbourne for 9 months to a year, or you learn how to do all the stuff, and that'll be awesome. So went and signed up, and then spent more time outfield than pretty much anyone. In terms of, so there is an initial fitness test and all that kind of stuff to get into the military, but mate, I'm about 25 kilos overweight right now, and I could probably still pass that fitness test. It was pretty easy. Okay. It's like 15 push-ups and level 6 on the beat test, which is just above walking really, and then I think about 35 or 45 sit-ups or something with your feet held. So not a big stretch to get in. And there's an aptitude test, right? You got to sit there and do a computer stuff. And I want to tell the story, but I don't want to tell the story because it sounds like I'm bragging. But they actually made me do the aptitude test twice because they thought I cheated. So it's a timed-based aptitude test, and it's designed that you're not supposed to be able to finish it. And I finished it. And so I was like, I turned around, and as a psychologist administered, you're sitting in a room of like 40 other people doing it at the same time. And I turned around and went, hey, I'm done. And she was like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm done. Go sit outside. It's like, all right. And then about 40 minutes later, before the next person came out, and then they all sort of trickled out. And then the Defence Force recruiter came back and went, hey, Mr. Nathan, can we see you? And I walked into a room. It was the same psychologist, the Defence Force recruiter, and then one person from every service, so Army, Air Force, Navy. Like, we need you. There was something wrong with your test. We need you to do it again. Like, all right, cool. So I did it again with all of them in the room with me, and then I finished it again. And then They're like, go wait outside, and then came back in and they had all of the jobs listed
Hmm.
I could do. And the Defence Force recruiter said to me, I've never seen anybody have every single job available to them before.
Wow.
This is pretty cool. Can't wait to work with you. I was like, awesome. Like, I'm in. And so, full disclosure, I initially applied to be an officer when that first sort of application, because I'd sort of made pseudo executive at Centrelink and everything. So I thought I was this doing well and I'd be a good officer in the military. So I came back because then you have to do a whole heap of like psychological testing and all this other stuff for the rest of the enlistment process. And I came back and I sat in there with this psych and he's like, so what have you done with your life? I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, what have you done with your life? And I was like written on a piece of paper. And at this point, I'd been selected in Australian teams for sport. I bought my first house when I was like 21. I was, like I said, a pseudo executive at Centrelink at like 27. Like, I don't know, man. Like, what else do you want me to say? I traveled internationally. Like, I thought at the time that I was a pretty well traveled dude and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, I'll put it to you. And he like flipped around this piece of paper. And he said, do you see that score? I said, yeah. And it was a 15. I'll never ever forget. He said, you need an 8 to join the army. 10's the average. You need 12 to be an officer. I was like, hey, all right. Where do I sign?
Where do I sign up?
He's like, you don't get it. I was like, evidently I don't. Like, what am I missing? He's like, well, the guy I just saw, he got a 12. He has a Bachelor of Law, a Bachelor of Arts, and a Diploma of Legal Practice, and he got a 12. You got a 15. So what have you done with your life? And I was like, man, I don't understand the question. Like, I've lived my life. Like, I guarantee you that dude couldn't walk on to any court in the world and put an Australian singlet on and play. I've done that. I guarantee you he doesn't own a house. Like, I've done that, man. Like, I don't understand. And he told me then, point blank period, that because I'd never applied myself, he wouldn't recommend me to join the army as an officer, but he would recommend me to join direct entry special forces.
Okay.
And I was like, no, thank you. And so I said to you before that I'd like looked at the information systems technician job. That had led me to a signals officer, and so that was what I was actually applying to be. So I went home, talked to my wife, and said, he won't let me in. What do I do? And I went back to Defence Force recruiting. They said, you've got two options. You can go and get a degree for 4 years, prove you can apply yourself, or enlist general entry. And so I enlisted general entry and went in as an information systems technician, did all of that training, spent 18 months or something in Melbourne, eventually posted to Brisbane, deployed to Afghanistan. While I was in Afghanistan, I did some stuff and helped some of the special forces guys, did some version of special forces, like aptitude testing, for lack of a better term, with those guys. Did some stuff over there without going into all the minutiae. And then one of the guys sort of pinged me and said, hey, do you mind if I recommend you for coming into our signals unit? From there, because there's like really sort of two ways that you can get into special forces. One is you go and do the whole selection and become a shooter and do all that kind of stuff. So for those watching at home, the shooters are the commandos and the SAS guys that you see doing all the cool stuff, or then you can go in as like support staff. I went into support staff as a geek, information systems technician. So it came back from my trip to Afghanistan with a posting order to go to 301 Signal Squadron, which was the one commando based in Sydney. And what came back, funny story there, I came back from my deployment in October 2012. And because of all the leave I'd accrued and everything, I didn't have to go back to work until the day I marched into Special Forces on the 29th of January 2013.
Okay.
It was, in hindsight, and I'll say this for the audience, that was hands down the dumbest thing I've ever done, because it was like having nearly 4 months off. It was like re-enlisting all over again, like learning how to rejoin the military. It was the worst. And then to do that in special forces, I literally marched in to the unit on that day. And then I went straight under special forces signaler training. And I'm not joking. Slide 1, day 1, you are not killing it. I was just like, shit. And yeah, there I was. About the next 4 years, basically 3.5, 4 years doing that. And as one of my troop sergeants there so aptly put, and I stole, went some places, saw some things, wouldn't recommend it. So, yeah.
So tell me, and I've never been in the military or the Defence Force. The only experience I have is stories from people like yourself. And my dad was in the Greek Army, and it was pretty chilled for him. He used to hang out at beaches, and he didn't grow up in a time when there was any sort of war and stuff. I think he was quite young when World War II was on. He told me he learned how to cook there. He actually was a pretty good cook. I'll give him that. So for those who've never been in the Army, one of the things that intrigues me is I've noticed, and especially at Microsoft, for those who are watching, by the way, both of us do work for Microsoft. This is not a Microsoft affiliated thing. It's just something I'm doing on the side. A lot of people who seem to be really high performing people, really, from what I can see, really well disciplined. And I don't think that's a coincidence. People, and really driven, are people who've been in some type of defense force, military, Navy, Air Force, etc. Do you put that down to what would you, rather than me guessing, what would you put that specifically down to?
There's a couple of different things, I think, but the thing that I mentor a bunch of people now that try to get out of the uniform, both here in the US and back in Australia. I think the thing that you're taught in the military is to just achieve an objective. Like like you all see on the movies and stuff, there's lots of screaming and all that kind of stuff, and that's not really what the military is like in reality. Like if you have to scream, I ended up a corporal and people manager and whatever in the military, but if you have to scream, you've failed as a leader. But what you do get is there's a very specific chain of command. There's a very specific strategy, particularly when you're deployed to the Middle East or somewhere like that, or even Southeast Asia on counterterrorism operations or whatever. There's a very specific strategy that you're a part of, and you're aware of that strategy. So you understand the big picture, like we're here to achieve blah. You understand where your battle group and your particular unit sit in, and then you get your very specific orders for, like as a corporal, I would have orders like my troop have to go and execute this thing. And so you get taught that it's drilled into you, right? Like through promotion courses and everything else, like achieving the objective is the thing. And that gives you a little bit of, well, not a little bit, it gives you a very specific guidance, but then we know how to operate then, right? Because that's the best thing about the military is that it's a question you asked before, like the whole playing a sport thing, right? Like that teamwork, relying on each other, is and training and drilling in the same stuff all the time. So you know exactly what you've got to do, and that ability to understand what your capabilities are give you some freedom in execution. I use this analogy all the time, right? Like if you're told to take a hill, for example, and establish communications and blah, 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 like as a signalman, that was my job, get up the top of that hill, get a radio mast up so we can have comms for the valley. I'm just told to take the hill. My boss he's not micromanaging me how to take the hill. My job is just to take the hill, get up there. And so if I get there and the enemy's already there, then I've got to come up with a plan to take the enemy out, right? Like that, it gives you that ability to, okay, cool. Like I know what I'm here for. I know what I've got to do. Now I've got to figure out how to do it. And so it gives you a very, very specific ability to achieve an objective. Because you just go, okay, cool. Like this is what my boss has told me to do. I'm going to go and do it. And that's, if we get to this question a little bit with like how I've been successful in Microsoft, that's been the biggest difference between me and anybody else that I've worked with. It's when my manager has given me a task, I just go and execute. And then we could talk about the whole getting into special forces and high performance mindset and all that kind of stuff, because you get some very specific training there and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you've been special forces or not. You've been trained in the military and any of the services to achieve an objective, and you can plan and get there to your objective as long as you know what it is. So that's why I think we come out and just go.
It sounds very focused is the word I would use, rather than it being, I don't know what to do today, or I'm going to procrastinate. I'm going to focus on this particular task and I'm going to get it done. And even thinking out loud about that comment, the people I do work with who do really well and are high performers at Microsoft are the ones who do, when you say, here's the task, they understand the task, they understand the scope, they focus on that and they execute on that particular task. So it's interesting hearing that. That's actually, so it almost makes it hyper focused on that particular area you're looking for, but then gives you the anonymity to be able to just go and do that on yourself without being micromanaged.
Yeah. And I'll say to counterpoint that, like I'm sitting here sounding like I'm a wizard at what I do. At the same time, man, like it's kind of been in some instances, particularly moving here to the US, wasn't so much in Australia. Like Australia, you know what, like the Australian culture is like, cool, just get it done. Whereas here in America, it was like, well, and I'm like, cool, like that's the goalpost. I'm going, you and you, come with me. But then here in the US in particular, there's a very, people like to be busy and they like to have meetings to talk about it, to make sure that everybody's on the same page and we all know where we're going and blah, blah, blah. And I'll be honest, it's gotten me in trouble here. Because I'm like, I know where I'm going. Like, I don't need to have a meeting with all of you people to talk about where we're going because I've been told where to go. I know where to go. And like, well, you're not including everybody. Like, I've got the people I need to do the thing. Like, what are we doing? And so it has come, and it's like, I understand this is a me thing. Like, I'm saying it's the American problem, but it's like there is a culture here that I have not bought into. And at some points to my own detriment, because I'm like, I'm just going to go and achieve this thing and just leave me alone, let me do it. So it's also caused me some drama.
Okay. So yeah, definitely something worth considering, especially if you have to work with anybody outside of the culture and the country that you've traditionally worked in. That's something I definitely had to look at when I first started working at Microsoft, working in Asia, especially different cultures in Asia. One of the funniest things I ever had to do was I had to train the trainer in India, in Bangalore. And it was awesome. So much fun. If you've never been to India, it's the food there's amazing. It's an experience and a half, but we're all in the same room. We all spoke English, and yet everything was just lost in translation because totally different cultures. What I would say that someone who was in Australia would understand made something totally different in India. And I get where you're coming from with US culture. It is very different to Australian culture. I think the UK is probably a bit closer to Australian culture than US, which is interesting. You would think you'd be able to understand each other.
Yeah, the people it's funny. The people that I've vibed the best with and that I've achieved the best stuff with, like since I got here to the US, there's a smattering of American people, but I'd say more consistently it's the European folks that are. Whether it's someone from Ireland or England or even like Belgium, Portugal, because they're more direct like we are in Australia. Like there's no sugarcoating or anything. I do have a funny Asia lost in translation thing. When I was in the military, we were doing some stuff with the Singaporeans, and we had again, the military, people think that the military was all yelling and screaming. We had lots and lots of training about, like cross-cultural stuff and cultural awareness training and how to the high context and low context cultures and all this kind of stuff. And we were like, yeah, cool, we get it. And then we go to Singapore and we're in the middle of doing something and we get a flat tire. And so we had to go and brief our boss on what happened, because it wasn't one of our vehicles, it was one of their vehicles, but we were in it and it slowed the whole convoy down and we had to go and talk. Anyway, we said to the Singaporean guys, can you guys change that tire? They said yes. In Australia, that means implied task, change the tyre. We go off, tell the boss, flat tyre, blah, 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 be fixed by the time we get back, yada, 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 still on track for blah, blah, blah. Cool, no worries, get back. And the Singaporean dude's just leaning on the truck and the tyre's still flat on the car. And we're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
We said, can you change the tyre? And they said, yeah. And we said, yes, we can change the tyre. You didn't ask us. You didn't ask us to change the tyre.
You want us to actually change it? Oh, there you go. That's funny. That is funny. That is pretty good.
So we lost
I like that. Okay, so coming back to career.
Yes.
So how did the opportunity at Microsoft come up? Because after the Defence Force, you indeed got to join, and for those who are on, you joined essentially the same team that I was in at the time, in Premier Field Engineering and Services. So how did that actually occur?
Real honest answer, I have no idea, man. But I always told my wife that I'd get out of the army when my kids had told me they'd had enough, because we moved every 18 months and all that kind of stuff. And I came home from a promotion course in February 2016, and my oldest daughter was standing at the door the morning I got home crying because I always went away. From that point, I was like, all right, cool, I'm getting out. I had to hit my 6 years, which is you have a return of service obligation depending on the amount of training you do and all that kind of stuff. Mine was 6 years I had to do. And then, so I'm going to try and get out. So I worked with a friend of mine who had gotten out. He was my roommate in Afghanistan. He'd gotten out. He's like, call this recruiter, he'll help you. And so I called this guy, James Belcher is his name, give him a plug. He's a very, very good human. And we went and had a coffee. We had a chat about what I wanted to do, where I thought I would be useful and all that kind of stuff. And then I sent him my resume after that coffee, and he called me back and he was like, man, because being in special forces, you work with some pretty cool kit. And at the time, we were probably one of the only agencies in Australia. Like when I joined in special forces in 2013, we were already using Server 2012 and all sorts of stuff. So they sent me on about $175,000 worth of courses. And he was like, with all of these courses, you'd be a shoo-in for these jobs we've got going at Microsoft. I was like, you're going to work for Microsoft? It's like, what are you talking about? And it was, look, I didn't even compute, man. Like, and we'd had Andrew Lyons and all sorts of people come in and actually, and Ian Bartlett and all these like Microsoft people working with us. And I didn't even compute that I could be at the same level as those guys. And so then, I had 5 interviews, 7 different people in those 5 interviews. And I swear after, I was going to say, look, you can all look him up online, but you probably can't because he doesn't exist online, Mr. Alex Gonzalez. So he was my technical interview.
All right. Yeah.
So I had my first meeting my first ever interview with Microsoft in that morning. It was a Friday morning. It was like 9 o'clock. I had to lie to my boss in the army and tell him I was at a medical appointment or something to go and have this interview. Probably admit that now 8 years later so I don't get arrested. Then they called me back and said, can you be here at 4 for a technical interview? And I went back for the technical interview with Alex at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. And I walked out of that convinced I'd failed because it was all about Active Directory and all that kind of stuff. And I did okay until he asked me to explain Kerberos. And I knew it. Like I granny tickets and all that kind of stuff. And I knew it, but I was so stressed that I could see the words in my head and I couldn't get them out. And I even just said to him, like, I'm sorry, I know what the answer is, but I can't verbalize it. And I remember saying that to him in the interview. And he's like, no, it's all right. And we, the interview went for another 20 minutes or something. Then I went home and called my wife. And I'm like, oh, I'm done. It was a nice try, but whatever. And then, they called me back a couple of days later. It ended up taking like 6 weeks to interview, like with the way it all worked out and everything. But then I thought I was just going in as a consultant, to be honest, like a VDash, for them. Watching like a contractor type person who did work on behalf of Microsoft but wasn't Microsoft. I thought that's what I was going for. And then I think it was the second last interview that James said to me, like, they want you to be a PFE. I never even heard the term. And I tried to Google it and there was like nothing online and telling me what a PFE was. I'm like, what do they even do? Then you'd find stuff on Reddit that was saying that they were like wizards and stuff, and I was like, I'm in trouble. Like, what? Like, what's happened? Like, why do they want me to be a PFE? And then somehow got the job. And I'll never forget. Like, I was in uniform on the Friday of the September long weekend. I was in uniform on the Friday. I started with Microsoft the next Tuesday, and Martin was in Singapore for the first 2 weeks. And
I think I remember that he was there for a while. Yeah,
and so I'll say this for you, and the people that are watching will just have to laugh along with our inside joke. My onboarding team was Brian Farnhill, Rafaela Brownlee, and Mikkel Stedman. And you know what it's like? They give you your laptop on day one. Which I lost my mind because they didn't make me sign for it. They just handed me a laptop. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, don't I have to sign for this and give it back? And they're like,
no.
Sure. I'm like, and then, it's the first PFE test is build your laptop. Like, can this guy walk the walk? All the Microsoft standards have to have BitLocker and all that kind of stuff. And I'll never, ever forget. I'm like, what do I do with my BitLocker key? And Mikkel Stedman, Steady for those who know and love him, turned around and said, do you even Azure, bro? What are you talking about? Like, to me, the Azure was the Italian word for blue. I'm like, I have no idea what you are talking about. You never heard of Azure? I was like, no. And now here I am. And then Martin came back, my first ever one-on-one with Martin. I was like, what do you want me to do? And he said, what do you want to do? And it was that scene from The Simpsons where Homer's brain like gets up and walks and you hear it chomp down the stairs and then slam the door on its way out. My brain did that. I was like, what are you doing? I had no idea what to say to that. And, Martin being Martin, explained it all sort of to me. And, he worked for me and all that kind of stuff, not the other way around. And his job was to empower me and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I still remember 22nd of December that year, 2.5, 3 months, almost 3 months later, I remember turning to my wife and telling her I made a massive mistake.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't do it. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to be successful, and I had to get back in the army. So I
Nice.
don't know how to
Massive imposter syndrome there, right?
do not know how to be grown up. Like I
Yeah.
need them to tell me what to do.
So how did you overcome? That's interesting. How did you overcome that? Was there anything from the past that helped you with that, or were you able to sort of work through that? I mean, I wouldn't say the word anxiety, but the worry and the strain of that you thought you'd made a mistake.
Yeah. So it was funny because for those that don't know, Microsoft had at that time an internal readiness conference called Tech Ready. And it was Australia got a certain amount of tickets and throughout Premier Field Engineers, and it was like a lottery rotation type system, and new people weren't supposed to go. Like you had to have been at Microsoft at least 12 months before you're allowed to go or whatever. And somehow Martin got a ticket, and he called me like the middle of January and said, "What are you doing the first week of February?" And I was like, "I don't know. Like, what do you want me to do?" Because I was still onboarding like into Microsoft. I think I had like one customer or something, so I didn't have a lot going on. He's like, "Can you get to Seattle for a week? Like, is that okay with your wife and kids if you go for a week and go to Ready?" I was like, "I'll make it work." Like, I want to go to Seattle. And when I went to Ready, again, for those who don't know, you get to choose all the sessions that you go to. Like, there's like and I went to every session that had anything to do with security. And for my first time since joining Microsoft, I was like, "Oh my God, I get it." Like I was in the room going, I know the answers to these questions. And I don't know, man, like it felt like I 100%. I was like dying of anxiety, but being at Ready and listening to security people talk, I felt like I could breathe again.
Yeah. You felt like you were with your community then.
Yeah. So then I got back to Canberra. I said to Martin, like, that was the best. Finally, like, I wasn't the dumbest person in the room anymore. I understood it. And he just was like, oh. I was like, what? He's like, "I'm going to lose another one to security, aren't I?" I was like, "What do you mean?" I was a platforms PFA at that time, which platforms is everything on the server. And you can do security for a living. And I was like, what? And that, in all honesty, man, changed my life.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. So basically, what I'm hearing is like a lot of what you'd done previous to joining Microsoft, all the work you'd done in the army, some of the not the troubles, but some of the tough times making those calls when you were a debt collector, all that put together, it sort of came together in a way when you were at Microsoft, and it gave you that opportunity when the opportunity came up. So what are some of those skill areas that you think then, apart from finding your place, were actually able to help you be successful and actually start driving things like being promoted, looking at different roles, and then eventually to where you decided? And we'll talk a little bit about the US thing a little bit later on. But let's start with that, and then we'll get into at what point in time did you decide and for what reasons, and what did you do to prepare yourself to move to a different country?
Yeah, so then I think for me then, like I said before, like the ability to then execute. Like once I figured out what I could do, like I didn't stop. You can probably ask Martin, like I just said yes to everything. And again, there's been a few people sort of give me sort of side comments on, I must have really played the game to get where I am in Microsoft and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I just said yes. Like I'm really lucky. I tell everybody who listens on military things that I've done and whatever. I was on the military employee resource group here at Microsoft, but I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my wife, like giving up everything for me.
Yeah.
Like she's sacrificed everything. So I could just say yes to those opportunities. So Martin was like, "Hey, we need somebody to go to Singapore to, deal with this breach that's happened. Can you go?" I'm like, "I'll be on the plane on Sunday." Like, "Yep, no problems. I'm going." And so I just got exposed to lots of people, like from people from America, people from the product groups, that kind of stuff from the security side. I just built my brand, and they're like, "Hey, if anybody's doing this in Australia, like get it to Andrew." And I met like guys like Tristan Kington. He was the Asia cybersecurity lead for Premier Field Engineering at the time, and somehow I must have impressed him because he's like, "I'm handing the torch to you," and he gave it to me, and so then I became the Asia lead, the APJ lead for cybersecurity for Premier Field Engineering, and all that kind of stuff. So it was just, in all honesty, it was like saying yes and then executing, just like I can do this.
Okay.
Go, and the confidence of like I knew security because like the whole 8 years I was in the army, without even realizing it, was everything we did was security. We were the
Mm.
most good everything, and like even down to like encryption keys, like physical encryption keys and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I lost all of that self-doubt. Like I could stand in a room with anybody. It didn't matter what title they had, whether a CTO, CISO, it didn't matter. Confidently, like, this is it. This is what you have to do. And if you're not doing this, you are not secure. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, don't know how many, like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm going to tell you, blah. And that, like, I ended up getting a global award for one of the customers I worked with and all that kind of stuff. Like, because I just absolutely owned what I knew and yes to everything.
That's great. So it does sound like saying yes to a lot of opportunities. It's actually interesting you say that, because I remember one of the people that I love, do you know who Terry Crews is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't remember. Brooklyn Nine-Nine, for those who don't know Terry Crews. I love him. I actually met him in person when I went to the US once in New York. He was, by pure chance, we went to get a cronut in New York, and he was doing a commercial, and I said to him, oh my God, I fanboyed up. I said, I should have taken a photo with him, but like I said, I've got to shake his hand. And he stood up. I just stood up when he went past me, put my hand out. I said, Terry, I love you, man. Like, you're the best. Outside of that, the point of me talking about Terry Crews is I heard him talk about his career once, and he actually said he didn't care what the role was or the opportunity was. When he got an opportunity, he would say yes. He would appreciate that opportunity. He'd turn up early. He'd turn up on time, and he'd do the absolute best he could in that role. And I think one of the first roles he had was, I can't remember I think it was Training Day. He played a pretty minor role. You knew he was there. Like when you watch that movie, just if for anyone watch that movie, he's pretty cool. He's a great actor. But he said the point was saying yes and putting your best foot forward with everything meant that people looked at you and go, oh, okay, I might give that person another opportunity. I might call out to the person. So it does sound like you built that network and that trust from people in all different areas, especially your product group. So let me ask you this then. So going on to the question I said before, you then, for those who are following along in Andrew's career, so he went into become a senior premier field engineer, obviously promoted there, then became a fast track engineer, which was a fast track for Azure. So you do speak Azure now, bro?
Yeah.
And then that's when you decided, or that's when you moved to the United States. So tell me a two-part question. When was the decision? Hey, as a family, hey, let's go to the US, let's experience it. And I've been lucky enough to, obviously we're personal friends, and I see a lot of the cool stuff that you send through, including your adventures in Disneyland with Crocs, which is always fun to watch. But when was it a family decision? And then what, did the networking help with that as well? And then what did you do? What are the things you need to start working on when you moved to the US to help you get there? And then what made it successful once you were there?
Yeah, so super loaded actually. So joining Fast Track for Azure was funny because similarly, I convinced I failed that interview. Like another Premier Field engineer at the time in the Canberra office, Ben Harding, he recommended me. Then Cam Adams was one of the lead engineers in Australia at the time, and he sort of was mentoring me and trying to help prepare me for the interviews and everything. He'd previously been a PFE as well. And I remember calling Cam after interviewing with the two people in the US and apologizing for wasting his time. Because my last gig as a Premier Field Engineer was working with an Australian government customer, migrating them from Server 2000 and 2012 in 2018. And it was physically on-prem. Like we were going to data centers and putting disks in and doing stuff. So it was as far from the cloud as you could get. So one of the hiring manager who was here in the US called me to offer me the job. And I said to her, look, I'm not joining to be an Azure person. I'm joining to be an Azure security person because I've noticed that security in the cloud isn't done very well. And she said, absolutely go for it. So then I joined Fast Track. And to that point, security was like this tiny little thing they did they had these things called categories in Fast Track version. And security was Security Center at the time, not even Defender for that. Security Center was this one conversation a customer would get as part of their management stuff. I was like, nah, this isn't good enough. So I broke it out and built a whole heap of security stuff. I trained a bunch of other people. So I was the only security person at the time. And then by the end of that year, we probably had 7 or 8 people that could confidently talk both security center at the time, and then what was Security Insights that then became Sentinel. And we built a global security practice, and it was out of Australia. So I say all that to say, but continued to build the brand and execute very, very heavily on what I knew. I played to my strengths. I didn't try and be an Azure person. I was an Azure security person. Customer wanted to talk networking, load balancers, virtual machine scale sets, all that stuff. I'm not your guy. Like, I'll talk to you about your security stuff, but I'm not doing Azure. And then we were having an offsite in September 2019. So all of Fast Track for Azure got together in Seattle. And it was funny. I said to my wife, I'm going to ask our director if I can move to the US while I'm there. If that doesn't work, we'll come back and we'll leave Canberra and we'll move to the Gold Coast. Deal? And she went, deal. And she started looking at houses on the Gold Coast because she was convinced they wouldn't say yes to move me to the US. And so it was funny. I landed in Seattle, and then I called a few people and went up to our building. And my first hiring manager, she was there, and she's like, let's go have a coffee. And she was like, we're going to do this, and I need you to meet this person. I have to do this, and blah, blah, blah. And the part of the story that I'd left out was I kept having meetings at 4:00 in the morning, my time, with all of the people in the US. And I said to her, I will do all of that if you move me here. And she went, what do you mean? I said, I'm sick of having 4 a.m. meetings. Because you guys don't care that I live in Australia. You book it at lunchtime in Seattle, and it's 4:00 in the morning for me. Like, I don't want to keep doing that. And she's like, you would move here? I said, yep. And she's like, all right. And so she took me up to the main building. We talked to the director, and he's like, go and talk to that guy in the next room because he's got 3 headcount available, and tell him I said to give you one. And that was it.
There you go.
And there we went. And so then it was a long process. So, okay, you asked about the family. Yep. That's actually a really good question, because everything we've done as a family has been a group decision. And I'd verbally accepted the offer, but they hadn't sent me the paperwork to sign or anything. And so we sat my kids down, and at the time, my oldest daughter was, I think she was 2019, she would have been 11. And my youngest she just turned 5. I think she actually had her 5th birthday just after I got back from Seattle. And we sat all the kids down and we said, look, we have this thing. Dad's got an opportunity with work, but it means we have to move to America. And we had this rule in our family. We still have it. If one person says no, it doesn't happen. Because we've moved so much with the military. Like, it had always just been my wife and myself and the kids. So we didn't live near family. We didn't have support. It was always just us. And so it was, if one person said no, we didn't do it. And they all said yes. So when the paper offer came in, I signed it. And then the long waiting process, because I didn't have a degree or anything at that time, because it was practical experience, took a little while to justify the visa and all that kind of stuff. So verbally accepted on the 19th of September, signed the actual paperwork in 5th of October or something in 2019, and then didn't land in the US until the 23rd of July 2020.
Oh, wow. 2020. Fun time to fly to the USA.
Yeah. If you're going to move your family across hemispheres, why not do it in the world's largest pandemic in 100 years, mate?
Why not? Sounds fun.
Legendary.
Okay. So let me for those who don't want to know about Nathan, the rest of Nathan's career, I think it's pretty obvious why he's made it there. But you obviously then became an engineering manager, and then you are currently principal. Let me get this right. Principal customer engineering manager for the Americas as a security lead. Now, I'll ask this as a career question first, and then I've got a few more sort of general career questions for you, because I think you've covered sort of how you've gotten there. Was that part of the goal to become a people manager eventually? And do you feel that a lot of the skills, from listening to you, clearly a lot of the skills that you've built over your career has really helped you get to that point where you could become successful as a people manager as well? Yeah,
it's funny because I came over here as an engineer. I'd done it to get promoted in the military, you have to do a lot of promotion courses to prove that you can lead people and all that kind of stuff. They don't just, regardless of what you see in the movies, they don't just give you rank. And so I'd done a bunch of very specific training in the military. I'd been a trainer and a team lead and stuff for a little bit in Centrelink and whatever. And it's weird, I missed it.
Okay.
And I'll put it to you this way, I was asked during the interview process, what's the difference? What can you achieve as a people manager that you can't achieve as a mentor, right? Which is
a good question.
Fair question. My answer to that was anything I say as a mentor is a suggestion to that person that they don't have to do it. Anything they ask of me, I don't have to do because I'm a mentor. But if I become a people manager, I'm accountable for their success. And as weird as it sounds, that was the bit that I miss. I actually and it's one of my favorite things about being a parent. I look at being a people manager very similarly to being a parent in that I felt like I'd had enough individual success. I'd achieved a fair amount in a very short time in Microsoft at being, global security lead and blah, 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 and went up levels really quick. And I was kind of at a point where I was like, feel like I can have the most impact by giving back to other people and sharing my knowledge to bring people along. And so, I interviewed for an M1 role or a manager role in the team that I was in at the time, and lucky enough to get it.
Cool, man. You would be a fantastic people manager, I would imagine.
I've had some feedback that says that, and I've had some feedback that says I'm not.
You're always going to get that.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because like I said before, I love getting to know people. I love getting to know what makes them tick and then trying to provide them with the opportunities that align to that. And so it's really fun. Like at one point I had 10 direct reports and trying to balance, like there was some really senior people, like people that had been in the industry for like 20 years that did not need my guidance on how to do their job or anything like that. But they had very specific goals in mind in terms of promotions and all that kind of stuff. So then it was help them like, okay, cool. Like, how do I get to be your cheerleader and amplify this cool thing that you're doing? Like, let's work together to come up with a plan. You do the thing, you share it with me, and then I be your cheerleader. And that's kind of how I've tried to be a people manager, is to just be the biggest advocate for the people that report to me and really copy what Martin did for me. Just make everything seem really simple. Like this is where we are. You want to get to here. These are the steps.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, I got a couple of questions for you. So I personally have a career philosophy, I call it, or values that I tend to follow when I look at my career, and it's very similar to you. I think as you age, what you want to look to do is different. But I've always thought of it in three ways. I love helping people, so I was always tied to education. I remember the other two off the top of my head. I love helping people. There has to be some sort of purpose to what I do. I don't want to I'm not one of these people that wants to sit in a role where I need to prove what I'm doing has value. If there's no value to what I'm doing, I don't see the point in doing it. I need to have value. And I need to have some sort of interest in that area. I think when I started doing Azure Ranger, which was a role I did a while ago during PFE, I loved doing it because I was really intrigued in Azure and I was getting a little bit bored of doing the client management stuff. So, and then I had two options for a career. One to go continue doing client management and one down Azure. And so, no, I stuck to my values. So based on that example, do you feel that you've had, a philosophy in your career or guided values?
Yeah. It's funny because, again, talking to my kids the other day, I remember my first ever resume that I wrote. Somebody told me I had a statement, like a mission statement or something on the front. And I always remember I'd never forget. It was be the best at everything I do. And so I guess that seems and sounds a little bit conceited to say, but similar to you, I don't do things just for the sake of doing things. Like if that's what we're here for, I'm not interested. I'm not here to make up numbers. I'm not here to just plod along and just to me, this isn't just a job. Like for me, this is a career. This is something I want. Like I'm investing in myself, in opportunities to learn the cloud, opportunities to learn security. And I want to be a chief information security officer at some point in the next 20 years. So yeah, for me, it's if I'm not on that, if I'm not doing something that's going to help me get there, I have very, very little interest in doing it. And I've been offered other opportunities to, go and be a contractor and make oodles like that, literally thousands of dollars a day and all that kind of stuff. And I've said no because I don't want to just be a cog in a machine making money for somebody else. I want to do something that, to your point, I love helping people. I love that aha moment. When you see something click for them, it's a pretty special feeling. And again, I equate that to being a parent now, seeing your kid achieve something for themselves the first time is pretty cool. And it's the same as seeing, for me, a customer have that moment when I help them realize they can do something with security in the cloud, or somebody that reports to me and I see them go, oh wow, like I can do that. I can go and do this thing and get to that next part. Like that, all of those kind of things mean something to me. And so, yeah, I want to be effective, I guess, is the thing that my little mantra. Like if I'm just here doing nothing, wasting time, I don't want to do it. I want to be effective. I want to make a difference. I want to help people, and I want to be the best at it when I'm doing it.
So give me your highlight of your career and your low light of your career, and then we'll finish off with a question that I think I'll finish these podcasts off with.
Yeah, there's been it's been funny. There's been a couple of like lowlights, and they probably weren't at like times where people thought it'd be a low light. I'll be honest, man, like this first sort of probably 12 or 18 months of being the security lead here in the Americas, it's everything I've ever wanted. It's everything I've kind of built for. And it's probably, if I'm brutally honest for you and your audience, it's probably been the worst period of my life professionally.
Okay. Any particular reason why?
Well, we go back to what we were talking about before. Like, I see the big picture. I know exactly where we want to go. I've spent, since 2019, I've been in this cloud security space working with the product group and doing all of those kind of things. And then I was put underneath a manager who hadn't been in that space. So that person was spending time trying to build stuff that we had already built. And again, like, I'm not a precious person and I'm not a selfish person. If that manager who I don't report to them anymore, but if that manager had come to me and just said, hey, do you know about blah, I could have given them everything. They kept trying to like, oh, I'm going to go and meet with this person. I'm like, I already know that person. Like, here's what they're doing. Here's what we're doing with them already. Well, I need to go and figure it out. Why? Like, we've already got it. Like, you don't need to figure anything out. Like, you can go in there and look like you know everything. Like, here's the stuff. And they just completely disregarded it, like, over and over again. And so it was just really frustrating as a person. Like, I felt like I didn't grow because I didn't have someone supporting my growth. They were very, very focused on their own. And they disregarded a bunch of hard work that we'd spent literally years building. And so it's probably, ironically, but yeah, it's probably been the low light of my career. And it probably won't be a surprise. Like, there's really two highlights, and one of them is getting the job at Microsoft. Like, that was my first real IT job, like outside of the military. So to land here at Microsoft in my first go, I think was huge. And then my first probably 2 years in Special Forces, man, like I was in counterterrorism. I got to grow my hair and didn't have to shave, and got to do some pretty cool things and work with some pretty cool people. So those are probably the two highlights.
Okay. All right, so let me give you the philosophical question. If you could go to somebody who's watching this, maybe it's someone in the military, maybe it's someone who wanted to play footy or basketball, or as you were telling me the other day, playing rugby against some massive dude might be from Tonga or from who's now playing in the NRL, who just basically smashes you, and you realise maybe this is not the sport for me. But they see that, well, if Andrew can do this, maybe I can. What advice would you just give them? Just as all right, this is maybe the first part of what you need to do, and just think about it.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's funny because I have this conversation with a lot of people that I'm trying to mentor as they get out of the military, and I think it's for anybody that wants to get into like IT or even security. Like, I think most people know more about it than they give themselves credit. And for me, the advice I give anybody is that focus on your skills and then figure out how to translate them. Don't do it the other way around. Because if you do it the other way around, you'll always feel like you're missing the mark. But if you go, I can do this, where is that? It makes the translation of what you do. So football players, for example, they can work to a schedule. Like if we look at project management, right? Like their season's a project. So they have to show up to pre-season. They have to do all the pre-work. They have to learn all the new players for the new year, learn all the new players and all that kind of stuff. Then they hit the season, and each game is a milestone on a project plan. So they're used to project management. Right? And it's just a matter of, okay, cool. Like, all right, if I think about it like that, then how do I take what I do each week and then how do I translate that into a corporate job? And it seems a lot more overwhelming what we do than what it really is. And if you can break it down into simple pieces like that, it's much easier to achieve.
That's great advice, mate. All right, Andrew, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Sorry for talking too much, everybody.
No, it's great. It's really good. And until next time, thank you very much. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you for watching this episode of Simper Says. If you would like to see more videos, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Or follow if you are listening on a podcast platform to support the channel and join our community.